Tour is about Bayard Park, and it was this area was first platted in 1892, but most development was here between 1905 and 1915. And it was included in something also called the Columbia Addition, or this was the East End. It was a show place, and in 1901 the Chandler Avenue School went up. Only the 1920 gym over there's remaining of that. This neighborhood had its own fire department over near Washington Avenue, and it's kind of a Dutch colonial look, but it looks like a Dutch colonial one because the people here didn't want it to look like some kind of institutional building.
So it's still here, Dennis?
Yes. And this was the first major development in Evansville with deed restrictions. Lots had to be of a certain size. Buildings had to be of a certain cost to erect, etc. And all of Evansville's major architects of the time were represented: Clifford Shotwell, Frank Schlatter, F. Manson Gilbert, who happens to be my favorite, and F. Manson Veach. And in this neighborhood we even have a connection to Frank Lloyd Wright. We'll get to that at the very end, in fact. And of course, the other feature we have here is the park itself. And Mrs. Bayard, along with other community activists, purchased the land that was originally platted to be houses, and she thought it would be a wonderful thing and a wonderful remembrance of her husband, who was Samuel Bayard, who was a banker. And she put an endowment there, so there would be $300 annually to completely take care of the park every year.
Is the endowment still there?
I don't know. It may be. I wouldn't be surprised. But one of the other amenities here is the East Branch Library. And it's a real architectural gem. It was built in 1912. And both East and West branches cost $50,000. And the money to erect these came from Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie had a program throughout the country where he would give money to erect libraries, but the community had to promise to provide books, staff, and maintenance. Architecturally, it's Beaux-Arts classical, and it was designed by local architect Clifford Shotwell. And some of the things about it, on the semi-subterranean basement floor, you have Indiana limestone. Above that, you have lots of nice highlighting with terracotta, like Chicago. Chicago's known for terracotta. And look at the cartouches on each side of the Carnegie Library. Carnegie liked his name on things. And there are certain intellectual concepts that are here that came from Carnegie, like you go up to knowledge. That's why we have all the staircases, which doesn't quite jibe with our current Americans with Disabilities Act, which makes things access a challenge. But it's still a resource in the neighborhood, and lots of beautiful details. It's well maintained, and it's a I think it's an anchor for Bayard Park. Okay.
Why was this one, Dennis, put on this piece of property as the other one west is put in the park, as opposed to saying this over there in the park?
I think Mrs. Bayard wanted that to be purely a landscape without a building.
Okay. I I was wondering that because the
Yeah.
other one sits, right in
Right square in the
the
park.
Right. Exactly.
And there are some slight differences between the two.
Really?
There are.
I know inside there,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
I didn't know
And,
outside they kind of look the same.
There in the park there you can see a couple of little remnants of what was there, like the entryway, the stone entryway. They look like ruins now. And you see where there were crushed stone paths everywhere. And you can see going through those the little entryway there. You can see what the crushed stone paths were because of the vegetation pattern. Okay, we'll march that way. This house right straight ahead of us is the Bayard Allnut House. It was built in 1919. The architects were Anderson and Veach. Anderson and Veach there was an interesting firm. They provided not only architectural services, but they also were contractors. They are the ones who did Lincolnshire a little later. It's a prairie school designed house after the designs and influence of Frank Lloyd Wright, but it was done, of course, by the local architects. And the prairie school things has a horizontal feel, very broad eaves there, low-pitched roof. Other things to note: the windows. If you take a look. They're called margin sash windows. You see how the glass is divided up. That's a specific pattern that goes with that style of house. And sadly, when they put replacement windows in, they don't repeat that design. It's a little unusual in that the top 3/4 of the story is stucco, and the rest is brick. You see how they bring the brick up there, and they have at the top of the brick they have a belt course of stone. It's nice. Here for the City National Bank. Now, well, that eventually morphed into Integra Bank, which I have to update my notes now.
What was the gentleman's name? What was his name?
Bayard Allnut, A-L-N-U-T-T. There we remember I was talking about Anderson and Veach, the architect over there. Well, this is where Mr. Veach lived. He built this for himself. Henry B. Veach. Was completed in 1915, and it's Dutch colonial, which it has that gambrel roof or a barn type roof. And at the top of the windows you can see something across the front called the penteave, and very symmetrical doors smack in the center, windows, everything is balanced, chimneys balanced on each end, and a wonderful eyebrow dormer window in it. Look at that. And nice patterning. You see the sunburst design in the 2 second-story windows. Nice recessed entryway with the columns. Lots of nice design. At one time, of course, it did have an open porch there on the right. This was the days before air conditioning, and these open porches many times were sleeping porches. The roof originally was cedar shingle. But that doesn't look bad. That's a decent replacement.
What are what were those things that are sticking out there? They put, like
Above the windows?
beneath the windows.
Yeah, it's to look like a bracket. It's just decorative.
Those are just decorative. Well, down here beneath the sill.
Oh, beneath the sill.
Yeah, what were those all for?
I have no idea. It's sticking out of the stucco. My guess is, yes, I do know what those are for. Those are for the flower boxes that used to be there. Now I remember.
Okay, that makes sense.
They had flower boxes.
Okay.
Wasn't that a nice feature?
Yeah.
Sad that it's gone. Are both bungalows, and bungalows, of course, early 20th century thing. They're usually about 1.5 story. rather low to the ground. They like to have earthen colors. Look at the brick, you get that earthen color feel there. Prominent dormer windows, it's all there. These were designed by Anderson and Veitch also. And in fact, they designed a whole string of these bungalows along Belmead between Evans and Kentucky to go along there. That was one of the Anderson and Veitch's first developments. But other bungalow things, here take a look at, they all have prominent porches going all the way across the front. On the left, of course, they enclosed it. On the right, it's still open. And you can see on the right there, nice window designs, if you can see beyond the storm windows. Just nice, it's good housing. Usually the interesting traits follow through to the inside. They have a lot of built-in cupboards. Many of them even have little built-in niches for the telephone. Okay, we'll go down the Surgeon, and over here, Mrs. Jessie Cheesebro, who was the widow of Fred. All three of her children worked at Hercules Buggy. 4, the Miller residences. And they were built in 1923 for Fred Miller Sr. He was the president of Miller Bakery, an ice cream parlor on 6th, just off Main Street. And the other one was for Fred Miller Jr., the vice president of this organization. You know, they have similar massing, well detailed, well built. Take a look at the windows of the one here on the left. Up the top you can see the nice window patterning. And the porch, look at the details with the column on the very corner, and then, or the pillar, the pier, the brick pier, and then the column. Nice fluted column. The other one has nice stucco up in the gable. Again, another prominent porch, but look at can you guess where the front doors are on these? Come on, walk this way. Guess where the front doors are.
They're on the side, huh? Oh my God. Look at that. I hadn't noticed that before.
I shouldn't say front doors, I should say main entrances.
Yeah.
They face each other because it was father and son. And look, they share a driveway and they share a garage. So, it's unusual, but why not? Clifford Shopwell, Evansville architect, was the architect.
And he made this one look kind of Tudorish, didn't he?
Yep, this is more Tudor. Well, anytime you see the stick and stucco up in the gable, you can think of, you know, Elizabethan England, time of Shakespeare, etc. Nice details still remain. Went up in 1923 for William Miller. You folks remember Harding and Miller Music Company on Main Street? Between 5th and 6th. It's where the there's a new bar there now. The main Evansville Gate, something like that. But when this went up, it cost $24,000, and it's in the Georgian Revival style, which is supposed to remind you of colonial times in America. Very symmetrical. Look at how the doors plopped right in the center. Windows balanced. Goes up to the balance and symmetry goes up to the dormer windows in the roof. It still has its slate roof. Nice entry there with columns and engaged columns. Another engaged or pilasters means they're part of the wall, but nice. And this still has its open porch on the right-hand side. It has Bedford limestone, and the brick was from the Evansville brickyards. It's nice, even yet. Good flower shop.
Flower shop, yeah, been here for a long time.
Been here for a long time. The one on the very corner went up in 1915 for $9,000. Clifford Shopbell was the architect. It's kind of most notable for its red barrel tile roof. Those roofs last very well, except where there are some valleys, and you can see where the tarp is up there. Probably covered the valley. Brown rugby brick and nice grouped windows. Porch all the way across the front. It's what's called an American four-square. You can see the real square dimensions of it. It was built for George Bruner, who was the chief engineer at F.W. Cook Brewery. The house that Mrs. Bayard put the dogs here. They at one time stood on each side of the Bayard house on Southeast 1st Street. And she put both of them here. They're cast iron. And as you said, you used to play on them, and they attract children. Look at how friendly that dog is. And of course, one of two. The park wouldn't be the same without them. And you can feel how smooth it is on the top. People have been sitting on them and petting them through the years.
Were they modeled after dogs that she had? Or?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Time.
Nice, they're very nice trees in Bayard Park yet. And you take a look at this, it's a tulip poplar, and the tulips are about ready to bloom on the poplar.
Yeah, thanks.
That certainly is a grand house right there. This is the Daniel Wirtz house. It has a distinctive green tile roof. It was built in 1921. And what architectural style is it? Really hard to define. It's a little like a craftsman style with the broad eaves and that. Doesn't matter what style it is, it's nice.
Beautiful.
Good stone. Interesting symmetrical design. On the left-hand side, that's a porte cochere, which is French for a porch for a coach. And there's a garage that matches in the back. And Daniel Wirtz, the fellow who this was built for, was a lumberman. He came here to work in his uncle's lumber yard. And the business still survives as Maley and Wirtz, although the family's not involved. But Daniel Wirtz was involved with the schools, and so there still is a school named after him. If you go inside the house, you can tell that somebody must have been involved with wood, because there are many beautiful species and selections of wood inside. Walnut, cherry, quarter sawn oak, it's all in there. It's a gorgeous place, and it's well kept. They're away the pigeons.
Oh, is that it?
Those hawks or whatever they are, gargoyles,
Or owls.
owls, yeah.
That house right there could be Green River, Kentucky limestone. Most limestone used up until the late teens and early 20s in Evansville came from Green River, Kentucky. It's like Indiana limestone, but it's whiter. And you can tell the difference when you get right up to it. But you have to stand 2 inches from it to see the difference. It's another tour this year. Our sort of secret enclaves in the city almost. A lot of people don't know about these places here. This one right here was built for Henry Ruschi. Between 1921 and 1922, the architect Clifford Shopfeld. It's well designed. You can see a light brown brick. At the bottom of the second story windows, there's a belt course of stone. A beautiful entry with a depressed arch. I don't mean it's a sad arch, but what I mean it isn't a vaulting arch, but it's pressed down a little bit, but it looks very stylish. And wonderful patio off to the right, sunroom off to the right also. The house has balance, good style. Henry Ruschi, the fellow this was built for, was a former cabinet maker and co-founder of Specialty Furniture Company. Today, Bookie Bookwalter, the jazz musician in town, lives here with his wife. To it, there's another nice bungalow. You can get that very nice low feel. Prominent porch, dormer windows. Is the home of Dr. Pearl Combs, built in 1915. Dr. Combs was a physician and surgeon. He was on the board of Permanent Loan and Savings Association. He also later, in 1931, built a home in Lincolnshire and moved there.
It may be Dr. Combs. Mrs. Brooks is a relative of Combs. Her family name was Combs. They came from Eastern Kentucky, and there were two Dr. Combs in town. And one of them had an office on Lincoln Avenue across from Memorial High School, and one of them, I think, on the west side.
Yep, this is Dr. Pearl Combs.
Dr. Pearl Combs, okay.
On the left there was built for Jacob Naus. He was went up in 1924. Harry Boyle, the architect who designed the pagoda, designed this house. It's kind of, both of them here are actually sort of four square in design, a little austere, broad eaves, symmetry, nice window design, prominent entries. Mr. Naus was a miller in Phoenix Flour Mill here in town. A nice thing, when I was practicing this tour yesterday, a fellow came out of the house, came on a half trot from the house over to the side to ask what I was doing, and I spoke to him a little bit, and he's restoring that house to live in, because he said he just loves it here, to look out his front and to see a beautiful park. It still has that attraction.
Unitarian Church in Evansville, it's over on Morgan Avenue, had a site here back in the 70s or so for a while.
I do believe that was the house. I do believe that's where the Unitarians were.
Next house.
The next stop will be on the corner, at the catty corner right there. Right here on the corner is the Hermann Sir Heinrich house. It was actually a duplex at one time, and it's built in 1924. It still has its green tile crestings. And the brick came from the Standard Brick Company. You take a look at the gable end. Look how beautiful the gable end is, with the knee brackets and the prominent eave. The father of Mike Martin lives there and restored that house. Guess what contractor he used? This house right here, it's a fine example of shingle style. was built in 1923 for $22,000. Whoops, I got the wrong card for that one. It was completed in 1908, excuse me. Harrison shop bell, shingle style. The land cost $900, and there was a mortgage on the house then for $4,000. It was built for Edward Young, who was the manager of the William Small Hay and Grain Company. It's a little modest, but I think it's delightful. Look at the brackets that were cut out with a jigsaw. Interesting recessed porch and entryway there. A prominent three-part bay window on the first floor. It gets a little bit of light into the attic. Yeah. Has quite a history. It was built for Robert Williams in 1906, kind of in the Queen Anne style, which complex roof right there. Interesting chimneys, complex window arrangements. You can see it all there. Most of them are in groups of 3. Robert Williams and his family lived there for 3 decades, and then after that it was purchased by Winfield Denton. He was there from he was in the U.S. Congress from 1948 66. Denton was a Harvard Law graduate, and the federal building in town was named after him. Interesting history. It's designed by the architect Frank Schlatter, prominent Evansville man, for George Neitert, and he was the head of Neitert Produce Company here in town. I like it because of the windows. Look on the first floor, you can see the diamond head windows. And up in the gable, you have something called a Palladian window. Palladian windows are 3-part windows where the center rises above the other 2 and has a round head on it. Palladian, it's named after an Italian architect by the name of Palladio. The windows are fun. Architecturally, it's a 4-square style house that went up on Bayard Park. Went up in 1931. It's colonial revival. The architects were Edward Tolley and Ralph Legeman. They took over Clifford Chopbell's business. Colonial revival. Use a gable end like this, 2 stories, symmetrical, prominent entryway in the center. If you take a look, very nice pilasters, fluted pilasters on the door. Those are the flat fluted columns on each side, an elliptical overlight above it. And when we look at the side lights and the overlights above, there are more ellipses there. And look at the bay windows flanking the door. It's nice. Talmadge Vick lives there, and his wife Inez Vick just died.
Yeah.
Inez Preservation Commission for a lot of years. It was built for Richard Waller. He was an attorney who served in World War II. He volunteered for the ambulance corps. Well kept. I lied.
So it's a nice
Right over
house.
here.
Okay.
I lied. designed by architect Frank Slaughter in 1906. Cost about $10,000. It's an American four-square. Like four squares, it has a very prominent porch. You take a look at that porch over the entryway. It has a rounded front. Nice columns there. Alexander Crawford was the first resident. He was in the plumbing business. Okay, now we'll go over here. The Homer McMaster's house, built about 1925. The architects were Anderson and Veitch. It's an English cottage slash Tudor. Unlike most English cottage, Tudor, instead of being a story and a half, that's a full two-story one. But like the English cottages in the Tudor, it has a nice recessed entry, earthen colored brick, a massive chimney in front there, and a very, very steep roof. Homer McMaster's managed the Ohio Valley Coffee Company.
And what year?
Went up in 1925. 1916 for Henry Kinchel. Henry Kinchel was the secretary of Vulcan Plow Works, and which was one of the main businesses here in Evansville at the time. And it was designed by architect F. Nansen Gilbert. He interpreted this as Dutch colonial. I don't necessarily see it, but I don't care. I like it. It's a beautiful design. Look at this side porch here. Wonderful columns, good proportion, interesting shingle design. Steep roof here on the side. The columns, the fluted columns, you can see in the main entry over there on the side, or is that the front? One doesn't know, but who cares? It's a nice design. You can see underneath the porch here two French doors. It's great, and as we walk around the side here, you can see that the style holds together. It's very unusual. F. Nansen Gilbert is my favorite architect. I think he had the best artist eye of any architect that Evansville has ever had. Nansen Gilbert, the architect who designed this, was learned the trade by, after going to Georgetown University, he spent about 3 or 4 years in the Mediterranean looking at classical architecture. So he understood proportion from examples he saw in Greece and Italy and southern France. He saw the best and remembered what he saw. But here on the side you can see French doors everywhere, nice columns again, and just pleasing proportions. He understood all of those things. He practiced architecture in Evansville till 1918, when 2 things happened in his life. 1, he got in the middle of an acrimonious divorce, and 2, he said, "Uncle Sam needs me in Europe." And he joined the army, and he left, and he didn't come back until he was retired from the U.S. State Department.
What year was that?
In the 1960s.
Is
So
that
do you
right?
give up being an architect then?
No more.
No more.
Really?
He was very conversant in many European languages, so he was stationed here and there by the State Department, and enjoyed himself traveling. Okay, this was the first park where a development grew up around it, and Mrs. Samuel Bayard and several local people purchased the land, developed the park, and there were plantings here. There was a well. There were symmetrical paths winding through it. It was quite a place, and it was a place where the community here had the Bayard Park neighborhood Christmas tree. it still is a community asset. This is Frederick Romer Peters' house. It was originally built in 1908, although the two-story addition on the right-hand side went up in 1924. Clifford Shotwell was the architect for that. Frederick Peters was the first editor of the Evansville Press. And really developed the newspaper into what it was. His son also is of note. His son, William Wesley Peters, has the dubious distinction of having two dictators as father-in-laws. He married two women by the name of Svetlana, and the first one was Frank Lloyd Wright's stepdaughter. And the second one, she died in an auto accident. And the second one was Joseph Stalin's daughter.
Oh my word.
So, but anyway, William Wesley Peters actually had a long association with Frank Lloyd Wright. He was in his first class of fellows in his studio at Taliesin. And that's where he fell in love with Frank Lloyd Wright's stepdaughter, and it was disapproved. So he came to Monroe to Evansville for 2 years and built a couple of buildings, only one of which still stands, that shows the influence of Frank Lloyd Wright. And then after 2 years, he was allowed to marry Frank Lloyd Wright's stepdaughter. They had 2 or 3 children, and he remained in association with Frank Lloyd Wright. He was the primary engineer behind such buildings as the Guggenheim Museum, Falling Waters. He was the go-to man for Frank Lloyd Wright for engineering on those things. When Frank Lloyd Wright died, William Wesley Peters took over Frank Lloyd Wright's studio, Taliesin, and was in charge of that until his own death. But anyway, it still is a delightful house, sort of a Cape Cod look to it, well maintained. And in fact, it attracted another interesting character, Reverend Walt Wongren, who wrote the Book of the Dun Cow, which one year won the New York Times Book of the Year Award for children's literature. So it's an interesting house. Again, still well maintained, and a nice piece of architecture, and interesting people were here.
Wow. Wow.
That's the tour.
Thank you. Yes, very much. Very interesting.
In going down there, you'll see a 2-story house that's obviously just been restored. The Department of Metropolitan Development got the house from HUD for $1, and we gave it to Hope of Evansville, and they restored it, and it was just gorgeous. They sold it, and it's fantastic on the inside. They cleaned up the woodwork. They refurbished the butler's pantry. They were going to turn the butler's pantry into a half bath downstairs, and I said, don't you dare. That's a real character mark for that house. And I'm sure any lady would love to have a house with a butler's pantry.
You got it.
Maybe a butler too, but it's down there. Take a look at it. It's one of the positive things that's happened in this neighborhood too.
This is the house that Dennis just reviewed. It was just sold with the butler's cabinet in the basement. Stanley Hall School served many people on the east side for many, many years. This is a big empty lot near the East Side Library. The East Side Library we just reviewed. Very prominent Carnegie gift for $25,000 in the early 1900s. And then Bayard Park behind the library, and we just made a tour around that whole large city block around Bayard Park.